Thank you all so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here, and it is so wonderful to be together in person and to get a chance to share a little more detail about exercise as one of the opportunities for wellness when living with Parkinson's, and really for all of us. Even when you don't have Parkinson's, exercise is really an important part of a healthy lifestyle. And I do want to share a little bit more about my background. So, there's the educational background, but what led me to be in the unique position that I am now of getting an opportunity to work specifically with people who have Parkinson's and see them benefit from exercise on a regular basis is based on having gone to USC for physical therapy school. When I was there in the early 2000s, that's when some of the first research was coming out showing that exercise was not only beneficial for the body, for our muscles, our bones, but it really impacted how the brain functioned. And so I learned in physical therapy school 20 years ago that people with Parkinson's could get better. In physical therapy school, there was some of the earliest research looking at exercise for people with Parkinson's showing that it didn't just benefit the body, but it really benefited the brain. And that was very interesting to me. I started implementing what the research said as a new grad, feeling like I didn't really know what I was doing as a physical therapist, but I was lucky to have some structure with a program called LSVT Big and the research coming out of USC that was looking at high intensity exercise, walking and jogging on treadmills, and I started implementing that and saw that people were getting better. And some of these people told me they had been to physical therapy elsewhere and it didn't really make that much of a difference. But when we implemented what the research said, people started to actually experience improvements. So I realized, wow, this is a lot of fun. I love working with this group of people. This is really the area that I want to specialize in. So I have been working with people with Parkinson's for 20 years. From 2010 to 2015, I worked at a hospital down in Orange County, Hoag Hospital. They have a great movement disorders program. It was a wonderful place to work. But I found as a physical therapist, I was frustrated in the way that I got to work with people. Sometimes one time a week for physical therapy. In some cases, we did get to utilize the intensive, the LSVT Big program, and see people more frequently. But Medicare and certain, all insurances have some limitation in how physical therapy is paid for and available. Sometimes the limitation is the dollar amount per year or the number of visits. But what the research is saying is that people need access to exercise on an ongoing basis and ideally frequently throughout the week, multiple times a week, perhaps different forms of exercise. And that's not really what we had the opportunity to do in the traditional medical system. I had a number of people that were joining the classes that we had after they did their individual therapy, and they really enjoyed those classes, not just for the research-based exercise, but for the camaraderie and the friendships that they were building. There was a cafe outside the hospital, and after our exercise class in the morning, they would go have breakfast together. So that really brings in that community aspect that Dr. Supermanian was talking about. At the hospital, I tried to expand the programming. We had 5 classes a week. Those classes were full. So I tried to expand the programming there, and that just wasn't really possible. Space, staffing, the limitations that exist. And so in 2015, with the encouragement of a group of people that I worked with, I left the hospital and started my own business because I really wanted to be able to offer what the research said was beneficial. And that is more ongoing access to exercise on a regular basis, different types of classes, different levels of exercise, higher and lower intensity levels, different forms. So I got started exercising in a park, so we got some nature there too. Sometimes we got the sprinklers turned on while we were exercising. Then I rented space in a physical therapy clinic and then a gym, and then we got our own space in 2019, which we then promptly had to shut down for a year during the pandemic, but we have been able to resume since then and grown. We now have over 40 classes a week, specifically for people with Parkinson's. We have 7 different types of classes at 5 different levels, and a lot of special equipment. And this is a gym in the community, and so this is something that is accessible to people. We run like a membership, and we have a lot of fun every day, and there's a huge social component. I think if you ask our members why they like coming, more people would much more often say the camaraderie and the friendships that they're developing. The exercise is kind of the secondary. But what I see as a physical therapist is the impact that it can make for people. So I am going to go into some of the research, but I think what is really interesting to see is more tangible results. As a physical therapist, I am very excited to hear that, ongoing research is showing that exercise may have the ability to actually modify Parkinson's, modify the disease, slow Parkinson's progression over time. But as an individual living with Parkinson's, it's kind of hard to, what exactly does that mean? Over the long term, can you feel from day to day that it's slower than it would be if you weren't exercising? That's kind of a hard thing to capture. So I have some examples to start off with of some of what I consider really tangible ways that I've seen exercise benefit people. So I've seen exercise improve mobility and quality of life. We also have research that supports that. I've seen people maintain improvement over long periods of time. So when I left the hospital, it was a group of about 20 people I was working with in classes that encouraged me to go out on my own so that we could expand what we were doing. And about 10 of those people I'm still working with now. So I have a long-term relationship, getting to exercise with people on a weekly basis for over 10 years who have been living with Parkinson's for a long time. So I've seen a lot of things happen. I've seen highs and lows, and during the pandemic, obviously, it was very challenging. We weren't exercising together in person. We moved online. That worked for some people. It didn't work for other people. Some people had a decline in function during that time. Some people had injuries. But then I've seen, from the lows, I've seen people be able to recover and improve again. And sometimes you might, when you have a setback, you might think like, well, this is it now. And that it's not always true. That doesn't have to be the case. So I've seen people really maintain or improve over long periods of time. Potentially that it does mean we're slowing the disease progression. We don't really know for sure because there isn't an easy way to measure that, but it makes sense that that could be happening. We see that we can help treat some symptoms that can be resistant to medication. Medication is very important and helpful. It's not a perfect solution. So there are some symptoms that medication may not help you with as much, or some people after living with Parkinson's longer experience some fluctuations throughout the day in their dopamine levels related to absorption of medication. And so when medication is working, they feel good and it's helpful, but there are times during the day where medication isn't working as well. And we see where exercise can really come in and support people. And the better they're moving because of exercise, they can manage kind of those fluctuations a bit better. And then helping someone recover faster after an injury. Ideally, no one would ever have an illness or injury, but that's not really what's true for being a human. As we go through life, things happen. Sometimes we get sick or we have an injury that may impact your ability to exercise or affect your symptoms. And again, that's where sometimes people feel like, well, this is my life now. This is what's happening. But you can recover and improve after injury, and I have some pretty powerful videos that show examples of this. So this is one of the women that I've been working with, and here's an image of a woman who's younger. This is not kind of that typical image from the textbooks. And I met her when she was about 12 years, I think, into her diagnosis. She was diagnosed at 40. She worked for a number of years after that, and then there was a point where she didn't feel like she really was able to perform at the level that she wanted to in her work, and so she did retire early. This did allow her to have a bit more time to focus on her health and wellness and to start exercising more consistently. So what we saw with her is we saw an improvement in her mobility and her balance. Another important factor for her is medication. So when she first started exercising, she was on the equivalent of 1,500 milligrams of medication. There's a formula that you can do where you put in different types of medication, and it kind of spits out one number that is the levodopa equivalent daily dose. So even if you're taking medications other than levodopa, you can kind of come out with one number. And that is something that is more commonly used in research, maybe not as much in day-to-day clinical practice or that people are monitoring it, but it is something that's relevant and important. Again, medication is very helpful and important, but there are some challenges that come along with it. So she was starting to experience some fluctuations throughout the day and side effects like dyskinesia. When she started exercising, she was able to reduce her medication over time. From 2012 to I think it was about 2014, 2 years in, she had gone from 1,500 milligrams down to 900 milligrams a day, so a third less medication, and thereby experiencing less side effects. And then at this time in 2026, I just checked in with her. her medication daily dose now is around 1,200 milligrams. So it is up from what it was 10 years ago, but it is still less than 14 years ago. There's not a lot of research that looks at the interplay between medication and exercise, but that is something that, as a physical therapist working with people on a regular basis, I see a lot of interesting connections, and there's a very synergistic relationship between exercise and medication. Most of the people I'm working with, it really helps them to be what we call optimally medicated, which is a different thing for every person. But in many cases, having more dopamine in your system allows you to exercise better and feel better during and after exercise. And then exercise can help medication work better. And for some people over time, they may actually go down on their dosage, or we also have people who just maintain their dosage over a long period of time. Which can be helpful as well, because that's what we really want everyone to have, that medication that is so important really work as well as possible for you long term, and to minimize any side effects that you experience. So this is one of the most important things for her, was really how exercise impacted her medication needs. So a couple of videos of her exercising. So this is from a few years ago. I just pulled up some videos from the archive. So she was doing intervals of walking and running. One of the special pieces of equipment we have, which I don't know if I have a video in here, actually, I was thinking about that before. We have harnesses over our treadmills that are connected to the ceiling. And so if someone does have a change in their balance or maybe feels a little uncomfortable or unsafe on a treadmill, they can wear a harness for safety and still be able to push it, take their hands off, let their arms swing, and be safe and not have to worry about having a fall. So and it's pretty simple setup for us. It's not a huge track that goes around the ceiling like they have in some hospitals, which can be really cool, but ours is a very simple setup that can happen in a community gym. Here's an example of her walking on the treadmill as well, but we're adding a game to it. These lights are called blaze pods. As she is walking on the treadmill, there are different blaze pods lighting up, which she has to hit, and it's also telling her what direction to be walking. This is not something that you try on your own. This is something that you do with a physical therapist, but just examples of, people I think a lot of times think of riding a bike or walking on a treadmill as boring, and it doesn't have to be. That is our job as physical therapists and fitness professionals who specialize working with people with Parkinson's, is to help the exercise that is beneficial be as fun and interesting as possible. Then we get into some strength training, and when we do strength training, we really like it to be functional. We prefer more free weights and weighted balls and moving around in the space we're in, as opposed to machines. Machines, that's a good form of exercise as well if that's something you really enjoy doing. I would never tell you not to do that. But when you sit on a machine to straighten your legs and strengthen your quads, that's a different way of activating your muscles than when she's moving around in space and having to respond. Well, she's strengthening. She's working on posture here when she lifts that ball up above her head. She's working on power and amplitude as she slams it down. She's then working on reactive balance to step and catch that ball. In one exercise, she is working on so many beneficial things that are going to help her move around her space better, keep her balance, reduce risk of falls, and hopefully have fun and maybe get a little aggression or anger out, if there's any frustration about things happening in her life. Here's an example of balance, walking along a 2x4 for balance, and then we have some dots that are different colors and they have different letters. So as she's walking along that, we can make that into a game where she has to go to a certain color, or if there are letters, she's going to tell me a word that starts with that letter, or if there are numbers, we're going to add math. So this is where we can really add some cognitive challenge into our exercise as well. Exercise is not just for our body, it is for our body and our brain. And cognitive changes are something that can happen with Parkinson's, can happen without Parkinson's, but is certainly something that we want to be addressing with our exercise. And this is something that's being implemented with professional athletes, college athletes. Engaging the brain when we exercise is very important. This video is heard this week. So those videos were from a few years ago, but I wanted to make sure to have some updates. So here she is on the elliptical. She was really pushing it this day, having fun. Her birthday actually is today. So happy birthday to Anne. Here's her on the treadmill. So she's been diagnosed over 20 years now. I've been working with her over 10 years, and she is truly one of the examples and one of the people that really motivates me to do what I do. This is showing maintenance of ability over time. So the video on the left is from 2017. In the video in the middle is 2020. On the right is 2023. This is one of the tests that we use. We do a wellness assessment when people first join our membership and then every 6 months. This is one of the tests we do. And this test, it's very interesting, not just obviously is that high level of functional mobility. What the test is we ask people to get down on the ground into sitting and back up using the fewest number of limbs possible. So if you need to use a hand, 2 hands, a hand and knee, all 4 limbs to get down and back up, you use what you need to use. She is able to do it without any hands or her knees touching the ground. So this is the top score that you can achieve. And yeah, this is super impressive. A lot of people cannot do this, separate from Parkinson's. This assessment has been correlated to longevity. So in a population, again, not a diagnosis specific for people with Parkinson's, just adults. It was a study in Brazil, and they looked at people between 50 and 80, and people's ability to do this assessment, being able to use fewer limbs, was associated with longevity and all-cause mortality. So even though this, you might think, is completely separate from cardiovascular disease or experiencing a stroke or having cancer, what they showed is the more fit people were, and people were able to do this, the less limbs they needed, that was correlated with longer longevity. And this is the kind of thing, medication can help you have less stiffness, better balance, move better, but you really have to move your body and practice these kinds of things to get better at it. This is another one that we do, standing up, coming down onto the stomach, and in timing. So you can really see that from 2017 to 2020, she gets better, she is faster. And then in 2023, 3 years later, she's still right about the same speed. All 3 versions of Anne are very fast here, and it's very impressive after living with Parkinson's for a long time. This is another gentleman that I've been working with for a long time. These videos are from 2023. They're from a few years ago. He had DBS, and that was very helpful for him, but he did experience a symptom called freezing, even after DBS. He continued to experience that symptom. And this video on the showing across the spectrum. So I worked with him at the hospital doing individual physical therapy, and it was beneficial. He was improving. He had an HMO at the time where we had 12 visits that we got to do for physical therapy. He made improvements, but in my opinion, there was still a lot of things I wanted to work on with him. Luckily, we had classes at the hospital, and one of those classes we had was a cardio class where people came in and utilized the exercise equipment, ideally to elevate their heart rate. That's what a lot of the research shows is beneficial. It's hard to see in the video because it's older and it's kind of dark, but as he's walking on the far left side, he has shorter steps and he starts to experience festination, where his steps get faster and smaller at times. Over time, he got better. And even almost 10 years later, his steps are actually bigger here. He's walking without holding on. Long-term improvement is what we see when people are exercising on a continuous basis, and improvement in things like freezing that in some cases medication helps with. In some cases, it can be somewhat resistant to medication. Here's examples of some of the types of things we like to do: mobility exercise, balancing, working on core strength, upper body strength, doing obstacle courses. We really like to be creative with our exercise. Here's him walking on the treadmill, practicing different directions. For a lot of people who experience freezing, turns and trying to step sideways is one of the times that can be elicited. And the treadmill, again, this is not something you would try just on your own without professional supervision to help you get started, but him working on those different directions really helped build his confidence, improved his strength, his endurance for this type of activity, and made him much safer at home when he was moving around in his space and turning. So we really like the treadmill. For one, you can hold on. That gives you support to work on it. And that external pacing of the treadmill provides something special that is different than practicing off a treadmill. Both are good, but they are different. I think those were the 3 videos I have for him. Terry is another woman that I've been working with for a long time. And the first video on the left is back in 2016, she decided that she had a goal of being able to jump rope. And she actually let me take video of her not jumping rope. Most people don't really want to take a video at the beginning of the exercise journey or when you aren't feeling that great about what you're doing and you want to be able to do more. But she let me take video of her, and over a period of months, she improved to the point where she could jump rope continuously. So in 2016, she set a goal, and she was not able to jump over with both feet at that time. By December 2016, she can jump with both feet over, one at a time. In 2017, she starts to be able to do more continuous, and then in December 2019, she's now jump roping like a champ. And so jump roping, we didn't do a lot of jump roping. She walked on the treadmill, she used the bike for exercise, we did circuit classes, we did amplitude training exercises, the power moves. So jump rope was really just something that she measured. We do like doing jumping as exercise. We don't do jump roping that often. We do all different versions of jumping, but that does help her develop that skill over time. So, 2019, we were doing great. We had just moved into our new space. It was very exciting. And then a few months after we moved into our space, the pandemic started. We had to close down, and that was very frustrating for everyone. Let's see. Okay, so this next video is Terry. In 2020, she had a fall and broke her arm. And this quote, the video's playing, so it's not staying up for very long. I'm going to do it one more time. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. Terry had a fall, broke her arm, and we were in contact, and she said, I can barely walk. She was going from jump roping a few months before, feeling great, to barely, feeling like she could barely walk. She came in, we wore masks, we kept our distance, we started doing some of the exercise that she was used to doing and walking a lap in between. And you can see she was spending like 5 minutes on the bike, 5 minutes on the treadmill, but it loosened her body up, it probably activated something in her brain, and each lap she walked better, she started to loosen up. She showed up this day. Those are her pajamas, very cute pajamas. But those are her pajamas. She came because she was not able to change that morning. When she got up to come into exercise, it was all she could do to get out of bed and come in and to believe that exercise would help her feel better. A lot of times when you're in pain or you're not feeling well, it feels like I need to rest. I need to lie still. As a physical therapist working with people long term, there sometimes is a period that you need to rest and recover, but you pretty quickly want to start to get back to movement. And so with Terry, if you had not been exercising and had this kind of injury, riding the bike and walking on the treadmill would not necessarily have this type of effect for you. But because she had invested so much time and effort into exercise leading up to this injury, then getting her body moving again, doing familiar things, allowed her to recover significantly. So the change in the beginning and the end is 1 hour on this day, from her walking at the beginning to the end. And this was back in 2020 as well. So I asked her this week, let's just do a quick check-in so people can see. So 6 years later, she is 79 years old and has had Parkinson's for 17 years. So I asked her, I'm giving this presentation this weekend. Will you do a little lap for me? Terry, take a walk. It isn't like she used to bury in and have her eyes closed the whole time now. All right, Terry, what is one thing you would want people to know?
You can get better. If something happens to you and you've been exercising, it's been like you're putting money in the bank and you're making insurance so that when something happens to you, you don't fall apart. You fall down for a little while, but you can climb back up because you've got that great investment of a cushion taking care of you.
All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. So hopefully these are some really tangible things about real life that exercise can help with, where other things like slowing disease progression is very important, but may feel a little bit more like, what exactly does that mean? couple other symptoms that can improve with exercise: postural changes. That's a common change with Parkinson's, and in some cases, medication does help. But in some cases, people can have a medication, daily schedule that helps them move and with other symptoms, but they still experience muscle stiffness or changes in their posture. So this first gentleman on the left, he was also in his mid to late 70s at this time. I met him, and he came and did an exercise intensive at something called the Power Retreat, which is in Arizona. It's an exercise retreat for people who have Parkinson's. He came and exercised, and then he actually lived locally, and so we exercised together after that. And then we were teaching a course in May a year later, and I was looking at him. I was like, wow, he looks really good. And I took some video, and we pulled up the video from a year ago. And sure enough, after 20 years of having Parkinson's, having had DBS, being in his mid to late 70s, we still saw this kind of change in his posture, where like the shape of his body has changed when he is exercising and moving. And otherwise, there weren't really any major changes in his DBS settings or medication regimen. He had been doing rock-steady boxing prior to the retreat 2 times a week. After the retreat, he added 2 days of cardio. He would walk on the treadmill as long as he could, and then he would do some time on the bike, and then he also did the power moves. So now he was exercising 4 to 5 days a week and had more variety to his exercise program. So building off of that foundation of doing rock-steady boxing, adding in more days and more types of exercise, he really experienced a significant improvement. Another gentleman here, you can see on the left versus the right, how much his posture has improved. His step length is better, his arm swing is better. And I would recommend, even though none of us really want to take that video at the beginning, I would recommend getting some video. You can always delete it if you don't want to use it. But sometimes these changes happen, and it's subtle over time. Just like your posture changing and muscles getting tighter might happen subtly over time, and one day you wake up and feel like, oh, it's hard to stand up straight. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly over time, and you may sort of not even realize it's happening. The same thing can happen with improvement. You don't necessarily realize how much better you've gotten with exercise until you see a picture of yourself standing taller, or someone that you see that you maybe haven't seen in a while comments, wow, you look good, you're really moving well, what's different? So having video can be a really helpful way to see what changes over time. Last one that we're talking about, that symptom of freezing that some people experience, where it can feel like your foot is stuck to the floor. It's difficult to take a step. Not everyone experiences this, but when people do, it can be very challenging. And again, medication in some cases is helpful. In some cases isn't. Sometimes it helps some of the time, but if medication isn't really working or your dopamine levels are low, you could experience more freezing. So this gentleman, this is a specific assessment called the freezing of gait assessment, where there are certain kind of activities or movements where people may experience more freezing. In some cases, it is first standing up and taking a step, or turning, or going through a doorway. So we have a standardized test that we can go through to see how much difference from the beginning of his exercise and then a month later, how much better he is able to move. His steps are bigger as he turns, and then to approach that doorway. So you can see just the difference in time that it takes him and the quality of movement. Here is his floor transfer, getting down and back up. This is a very important skill. As a physical therapist, I feel very strongly that this is something that should be incorporated into all therapy and exercise programs, that vast majority of people, we should be getting down on the floor and back up to practice and to exercise, so it is a skill that you have. So you can see how much faster he got, and this is again just in the period of 2 months. So in that first video on the left, he uses chairs to get up. So he has that support, which that is a great way to get started. Then on the left, he's not using the chair, but he really kind of gets stuck in this on hands and knees to come all the way up into standing. I think that's one difference. As a physical therapist, I let people struggle. I am there, and I will tell you, I'm here. If you want help, let me know. I'll help you. Do whatever you're doing. But the more that you can struggle through and figure it out, the more you're going to experience lasting change. So I'll just let him show one more time, getting up quickly from the ground. And he's a tall guy. He's like 6'3". So the floor is really far away from his head. It's different for those of us who are a little shorter. The floor is closer. It's a little more comfortable. This is him walking when I asked him to walk as fast as you can safely. So when he first came in, he was using a walker for stability. A month later, he did not need that walker all the time, and he was able to walk much faster and with much bigger steps. So hopefully those videos are inspiring to see just different ways that exercise can help for different people who look different, who experience different symptoms. So it's important to think about what is important to you. Are there specific things you would like to get better at or be able to do easier? That's what physical therapy is there to help you with, to kind of identify those things and get started working on them. And then ideally, you have a consistent way to exercise, even when you're not doing insurance-based one-on-one physical therapy. So when it comes to exercise, what should we be thinking about? What you do for different forms of exercise and how you do it matters. So, I can go for a walk outside and not think about my pace and just let my feet step however they're going to step. Or I can go for a power walk and I can say, I'm gonna push the speed, at least for intervals. I'm gonna stand tall. I'm gonna let those arms swing. I'm gonna take big steps. So really, anything you do for exercise, there are different ways to do that thing. You can use a stationary bike and you could be reading a book. That's different than if you put that book down, play some music that gets you excited to move, and start focusing on doing some intervals and looking at speed there as well. The research shows when it comes to cycling at a faster pace, measured by RPMs, is more beneficial, especially for the brain. All forms of exercise are helpful in different ways, but when it comes to Parkinson's, there are some specific things to do that can really help you. So what you do and how you do it matters. In general, with exercise, there's kind of two main umbrellas that we think about when it comes to exercise: aerobic exercise and skill-based exercise. There can be overlap with those forms of exercise as well, which I have a slide for, so I shouldn't say too much. When it comes to exercise, how long you're exercising for matters, how hard you're exercising matters, and the frequency matters a lot. Dosage matters. If you take carbidopa-levodopa, you likely have to take it multiple times a day. There are different formulations that may last different periods of time, but the amount you take and the timing that you take it matter. And exercise is the same way. The type of exercise matters, the dosage, the frequency, and if you have been exercising and not experiencing improvement, you want to evaluate your exercise plan and see, what am I doing? How am I doing it? What is the frequency and duration? You might be just below the threshold that you need to do to really start experiencing more benefit. So the good news is there are many forms of exercise that are shown to be helpful. So you can find something hopefully that you really enjoy. You're more likely to do it if you like doing it. But I also would recommend that you identify things that are challenging for you and work on those things as well. As humans, our natural tendency is, that's hard, I'm gonna do the thing that is easier or that I enjoy more. But when it comes to improving challenging symptoms, it does kind of require facing them head on, identifying what's going on, and working on those things, even if it's not as much fun. Hopefully, the person you're working with, a professional who can make it more fun for you. So aerobic exercise is important. We definitely want to work on balance training, amplitude training, which really kind of evolves into functional mobility, getting into all those different positions. There are some specific forms of amplitude training that therapists and fitness professionals can be trained in. Power moves and LSVT big. Strength training is shown to be beneficial, and that's something that's really just important for all of us as we age. We want to maintain muscle mass. Dancing, tons of research. There was just an article, might have been in the LA Times, or one that came out recently about tango. All different forms of dance are beneficial in different ways. Boxing, there's an organization called Rocksteady Boxing that I hear is active in the community here. Boxing is one of the forms of exercise that can be really great. Tai Chi, yoga, the list, I could talk about it for days. This figure kind of looks funny. I did ask AI to make me this image. And I said, because I really want to show a spectrum where some forms of exercise are more aerobic. Riding, let's say, a stationary bike, especially recumbent. You're sitting and you're pedaling. There's not a ton of skill to it, although it still could be skilled if you set goals for your RPMs and you're trying to pedal faster than what feels comfortable. On the other end of the spectrum, Tai Chi is quite skilled, but tends to not be very aerobic. And then there are some forms of exercise that can be both. But this picture, at first I was like, oh no, I can't put that up there. And then I was like, well, it's kind of entertaining. So I don't know how this person's walking on a treadmill is pretty interesting. It's the handlebars really high. The swimming is pretty funny. So an example is boxing. Boxing, in most cases, is a skilled form of exercise. There's eye-hand coordination, there's agility, there's moving around in space, there's learning new and different things. That's very skilled. And for some people, it also can be aerobic, high intensity, depending on how quickly you can move, how hard you can punch, what types of exercise you're doing. So it is one of the forms of exercise that can be both, but for some people, it's more skilled and not as aerobic. So it's really ideal with your exercise, if you are trying to do some aerobic exercise, to actually measure with a heart rate monitor and see what zones are you getting into with regards to your heart rate max. And then something like power moves is a little bit like yoga, except it does not have the spirituality aspect that some yoga practices do. But there's a lot of the movements that can be somewhat similar, different positions that we get into. But the power moves are really geared towards addressing some of the changes that can happen with Parkinson's. So we focus on really nice upright posture, weight shifting and balance, trunk flexibility and mobility, and stepping and transitions and moving through space. So it's kind of taken some good forms of movement and giving it a bit more structure. And we exercise in different positions. This was a review that came out quite a while ago, but just this list, to me is very motivating of all the different ways that aerobic exercise can help prevent cardiovascular complications, help with osteoporosis. Our bone health is super important. Improved cognitive function. For a lot of people, that's a big motivator. Prevention of depression, improved sleep, decreased constipation, common symptom with Parkinson's that can be very frustrating. Decreased fatigue. You might think, well, I feel tired. Exercise is going to make me feel more tired. Sometimes, yes, and especially at the beginning, if you are deconditioned, as you start exercising, you may experience a bit more fatigue. But then most people, when they do get over that threshold, in terms of the amount of exercise they're doing, they start to actually feel better and have more energy. Improved functional motor performance, improved drug efficacy, and optimization of the dopaminergic system. So there's a lot that can happen with exercise. So, having like this kind of list up might be something that helps motivate you when you wake up in the morning to go do exercise. The amplitude training. So I really recommend everyone do some form of amplitude training. LSVT Big and Power Moves are specific programs that exist that have kind of defined exercises that you can go through and do, but you also can incorporate amplitude into anything that you do. When it comes to boxing, make sure that you're moving big. Sometimes like a speed bag, you might get moving kind of smaller and faster, and that could be good exercise, but let's, incorporate the next exercise in the circuit is a big stretch and opening. So let's make sure that we're doing different forms of exercise. And even as you move around your home, sometimes we talk about it like you can just kind of move around your space a little more dramatically. Take big steps, reach when you go for things, and really stretch, keep your joints stretched out. And over time, you can really retrain your brain to move better. This form of exercise was really designed specifically to say, okay, what are some of the key symptoms of Parkinson's? One is bradykinesia, which is moving slower, and then hypokinesia is moving smaller. And so they've seen with multiple research studies that when you help train people to move bigger, they move bigger and faster. When you just try to move faster, you move faster, but in some cases smaller. So that's why the emphasis should be more on moving big than moving fast. So this is the basic set of power moves. We exercise in sitting, standing, on all fours, on our back, and on our stomach. There's lots of ways to work up to this. There's lots of ways to modify and support you. If lying on your stomach causes low back pain, we can put a bolster under your hips and help support you. There's so many ways that if you look at this and think like, I don't know about that. There are so many ways we can help you get into these positions and feel comfortable. And the floor is a really great place to exercise. It's very safe. It's a good challenge, and it helps with things like bed mobility, getting in and out of bed, moving around in bed so you can get comfortable and sleep well. So I highly recommend, if amplitude training isn't something that you've incorporated yet, that is something I really recommend trying out. Here's just kind of some examples of aerobic exercise, and on the left with Terry. So this is her walking on a treadmill in 2013 and then getting to the point 7 years later where she's now able to jog safely on a treadmill. Here's Terry and I going back and forth. This was during the pandemic. We started doing classes online. And this shows both of us doing the same exercises kind of back and forth, moving big. in all different positions, really stretching, working on weight shifting and balance, trunk mobility and rotation. And when I first started working with Terry, she came to physical therapy not because of Parkinson's, but because of foot pain. And so luckily she did come in and we got started. At the time, we tried to do these power moves and she was not able to get into these positions when, a few years after she was diagnosed. She couldn't get onto all fours. She could not tolerate that. We tried to do a test called the 6-minute walk test. She could not walk for 6 minutes. And now she goes for 30+ minute walks and she can get into all these different positions. So another way that she's really gotten better. So what you do matters and how you do it matters. The frequency matters. When it comes to frequency, we don't have a lot of studies that compare different frequencies of exercise. Most studies look at 3 to 4 times a week of exercise because it's pretty well established that about 3 times a week is what is necessary in most cases for people to experience improvement. So we don't have a lot of studies where they say, well, what if you did the same form of exercise 1 day a week for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? Usually it's kind of a set frequency. The best research we have is from Dr. McLean, where she in her in the MVP study, Modifiable Variables in Parkinson's, one of the questions that they're asking is how frequently do you exercise? And so what they show is when people exercise 0, 1, or 2 days a week, there's not a statistically significant improvement in their symptoms. As soon as people cross that threshold of exercising 3 days a week, they start to see a significant change. And each day, additional day throughout the week that people exercise, there is additional benefit. So ideally, you do something just about every day. If you're getting started though, and you're like, that sounds impossible, then you have to think about what is doable and possible for you. Is 1 time a week what you can start with? Start there. If 2 or 3 times a week, whatever you can get started with, I encourage you to do so. And then over time, ideally, maybe you will be able to find time or feel a bit better and start to incorporate more days. So we are trying to utilize the research to guide our recommendations with exercise, but also understand that when it comes to all the variables with exercise, each person is going to need their own tailored program to really benefit the most. And especially when you get started, we have to be aware of what's truly possible in terms of what fits in your schedule. In terms of the duration, so even as few as 10 minutes of movement is shown to be beneficial. A 10-minute walk after you have a meal really helps with how your body is able to absorb the nutrients and, reduces any blood sugar spikes. So any exercise you do is better than none, and then the goal is over time to maybe slowly work your way up towards doing more. More research studies do 45 to 60 minutes of exercise per session, but if you're getting started, I would not recommend trying to do that the first day. You might not feel well during or afterwards, and then you might think exercise doesn't help me. It's just because you did too much starting off. So at first, I would recommend 5 or 10 minutes of movement or exercise, and then the goal is over a period of time to increase that duration of exercise. We do have, anecdotally, we have people who exercise as much as 2 hours a day. That's not really what I ever recommend someone do. That's a lot of time spent exercising. Research guides us and says that really 150 minutes per week is kind of the minimum to experience benefit. So then you can think about how you might want to spread that out. That could be 3 days of 50 minutes or 5 days of 30 minutes. There's a lot of different ways to do that math. But that is kind of one way to get a starting point and work towards that. When it comes to intensity, there is more and more research studies coming out showing that exercising at a higher intensity is beneficial in a lot of different ways. This is another place, though, where I see people do too much too fast and not feel well. So it's very important, if you hear high-intensity exercise is important, that you say, okay, where am I at right now in terms of my intensity? What am I trying to get to? And give yourself a period of time to get there, potentially months. And you might feel kind of impatient. I want to start this right now because I want to start helping my brain do better. But it's very important to give your brain and body a chance to adjust to this exercise so that you feel good doing it while you're doing it and you feel good afterwards. So a lot of people hear high intensity, they go out, they do a lot, they don't feel well afterwards, maybe they even have a soft tissue injury that they then need to recover from, or it just feels like, well, I exercise hard one day and then I need 3 days to recover. that probably means you're doing a little too much. It is possible to do too much, so you want to do the right amount and then over time try to work your way up towards doing more. So studies that I'll just pinpoint, moving through them somewhat quickly. I'm not going to talk a lot about each one. I think seeing the videos hopefully was the most impactful and gave you some inspiration. There is so much research out there, though. A lot of these articles are available free full text if you are someone who is interested in actually looking at reviews or research articles. Many of these are accessible. This presentation will be available on YouTube, so if you want to go back and look at these things and then Google the title of the article. I also did make a handout, which is available in the back if you want to grab a handout on your way. There is the citations for these studies is included in that handout. So this is a review article written by Dr. Eric Alskog, who is a movement disorders neurologist at the Mayo Clinic, and he did a review of many studies and said, aerobic exercise, there really is evidence for a direct brain effect to slow Parkinson's disease progression. And his conclusion from all the evidence is that regular aerobic type exercise tending to lead to fitness is the single strategy with compelling evidence for slowing Parkinson's disease progression. All patients with Parkinson's should be encouraged to engage in regular such exercise. So what is happening? People ask this a lot, though, and this review article discusses some of the things that can be happening. So exercise has been shown to have powerful effects. So some of the things that can happen with exercise, it can reduce chronic oxidative stress, stimulate mitochondria biogenesis, and upregulation of autophagy. Autophagy is our cell's mechanism for kind of getting rid of the trash that is in our cells. And that is something that can be impacted in Parkinson's. The cells are not clearing things out quite the way they need to. And that's one of the things that exercise can do is at a cellular level in your brain, it can help your cells function better. So pretty cool. Antioxidant enzymes become more active and effective in response to physical exercise. Exercise stimulates neurotransmitters like dopamine and trophic factors. So there are just so many things happening when we exercise that we do not know or feel. It's not easy to measure these things in real time. We can't do a scan to say how much dopamine are you producing now and how much are you producing after exercise. It's not something that's easy to do clinically, but hopefully just very motivating to see all the different things that can improve. I really like this paper as well. Dr. Petzinger is at USC down in Los Angeles, and they talk about the different things that can happen when you do aerobic exercise. It really increases blood flow up to the brain. It brings the healthy nutrients that the brain needs to function optimally. And then when you do skill-based exercise, where you're trying to do something new or different or move better, develop a skill, like when you learn to play a sport or play an instrument, at first it might feel kind of awkward and challenging, and then as you practice more, you get better. And that is literally rewiring your brain. It is developing connections, and those neurons are learning to function together. So that is what is happening at the level of the brain, which then helps people be able to move better and leads to better outcomes in their life. Another article that talked about how a lot of people are doing more goal-based exercise, but not as many people are truly doing aerobic exercise, which is required to maximize neuroplasticity. What's the best exercise intensity? So this study looked at 2 different levels of aerobic intensity, people working between 60 and 65% of max heart rate, and then a group working at 80 to 85%. And what the research is showing, and this is in people newly diagnosed within 3 years after being diagnosed, that higher intensity, when people are able to achieve 80 to 85%, they were experiencing more benefit than those working at 60 to 65%. Working at 80 to 85%, though, is not possible for everybody, and if it's not for you, don't worry. It doesn't mean you can't benefit from exercise. Dennis, the gentleman I showed walking on the treadmill for him was never aerobic. We were measuring. He was never getting into an aerobic zone, and he still benefited significantly. So you can benefit no matter what, but if possible, you do want to try to achieve those higher heart rates. It's also important to acknowledge, though, that one of the symptoms of Parkinson's can be a change in how the autonomic nervous system functions, which is what regulates our blood pressure and heart rate. Some people with Parkinson's have a lower resting heart rate, and their heart rate may not respond quite the same way to exercise. So it's important when setting your goals to kind of have better numbers that you're working towards. In age estimated max heart rate may not be appropriate for you. So if you're exercising and you're sweating and getting out of breath and working really hard, but you don't see your heart rate elevating to the numbers that it's expected to, that's something that should be looked at. And maybe it would be helpful to have a stress test or a cardiopulmonary exercise test or work with a physical therapist so they can help you figure out what your numbers should be. This is the cycling study where they showed that two groups of people riding stationary bikes, the ones who were pedaling faster with the goal of 80 to 90 RPMs experienced more improvement than those pedaling at a self-selected pace. So here we're saying kind of we need to push it. Everybody needs to get a bit out of their comfort zone. This study that was published by researchers up in Vancouver showed that when people are exercising regularly, they do actually have an increased release of dopamine. So, that's dopamine production and release and use is one of the big factors when it comes to Parkinson's, and exercise can really have an impact on that system directly. It's pretty cool. So we want to make it happen. When you're exercising, it's really ideal if you can be measuring your heart rate. If you are doing exercise where the goal is for it to be aerobic, ideally you use a heart rate monitor, whether these are arm straps or if you use a chest strap, but actually measure and see what is your heart rate getting to and what percentage zone. This is something that some of you may feel comfortable doing on your own. Maybe you've used heart rate monitors in the past. If you don't and this feels a bit overwhelming, that is what your professionals, your physical therapists, your fitness professionals can really help you figure out what am I going to use and what am I trying to achieve with this exercise. And like I mentioned before, autonomic symptoms may impact what your physiologic max heart rate is, and that's important to take into consideration. So how I approach an exercise plan with someone new, I ask them about, are there any forms of exercise that they enjoy doing? We definitely want to spend time doing that. If there is anything that is challenging, though, we do also want to find a way to work on things that you may not like as much because it can be very helpful. Do they have something that they're doing for aerobic exercise, or is that something we're trying to put together for their plan? There's lots of different ways to do aerobic exercise. Any form of amplitude training. Again, that can be a specific program or that can be infused into everything you do. Is there anything specific that they want to work on? And then kind of the building blocks of an exercise plan, just a baseline level of activity, perhaps a step count. Might be helpful just to kind of see how active you are throughout the day. Over time, we want to increase our intensity. We want to work on specific skills. And then there also is research that variety is beneficial as well. So if you do have one form of exercise you really enjoy and you're doing that consistently, great. Maybe the next consideration is trying something new and different, which is really great for the brain. When we try new things and learn new things, we really stimulate our brain a lot. So to summarize, what the research says is that ideally we work towards exercising 6 to 7 days a week. Like I said, if that is too much for you right now, you figure out what's right for you, and that's how you get started. Somewhere between, the research says, between 30 and 120 minutes per day. 45 to 60 is what the research says about aerobic exercise. And again, these might be things we're working towards. It depends on where you are now as to if you're just getting started and you're working towards this, or you're somewhere in the middle and you're just working on enhancing your program so that you experience even more benefit from it. We both want consistency and variety in both the type of exercise we do and also the intensity. I am not recommending that people do this 80 to 85% high intensity exercise every day. Most of us need a recovery day. We've got to work hard on one day and then do something like yoga or Tai Chi or power moves or something less intense on the other days. We do ideally want to work towards having aerobic exercise 3 times a week. If you have pain or changes in your balance or other things that limit your ability to exercise, then please do work with a physical therapist. There are physical therapists in this community that can help you get started and continue with an exercise program, and quite a few of them are here. So if you haven't talked to them yet, you want to make sure to walk around and connect with them. And then just overall, you might need to work a little bit harder than what feels comfortable. But that's really in life. That's kind of where things change, right? Is when we get outside of our comfort zone. So the same is true for exercise. I did it. I know that was a lot in a short amount of time. That's why it's great that it was recorded and you can watch it again. And on YouTube, you often even can change the speed of the playback. So if you need a little more time to process the information that I was saying and you would have liked me to speak a bit slower, the YouTube video, you can do that. You can say, hey, let's take this down to 0.75x, and I want to have a little more time to process this information. But I did want to share both the research, what I see clinically. Hopefully you're all excited and inspired to go for a walk this afternoon after you have lunch, and we have our Q&A, and we're going to do some exercise after lunch as well. You'll get exposed to the power moves if you haven't already, and then questions will happen during that Q&A later. All right, thank you so much. All right, so let's go ahead and do some power moves, that amplitude training. When it comes to the power moves, there are 5 main positions of exercise: sitting and standing. And when you do standing exercises, you can use support if that's helpful in moving big. So we're going to be demoing both the standing and sitting versions and standing with support. So anybody who would like to stand up to exercise with us, you're going to join in. We're going to move our bodies a little bit before the last few parts of the symposium today. So please do stand up if you would like to. If you're going to stay in sitting, if you can just adjust your chair so you're facing forward, you have a little bit of space around you. The power moves are amplitude exercises where the goal is to move big. Typically, when we do exercise, we have a little more space and a different setup, but we also want to be able to move big even in tighter spaces. So it's good to practice. So the power up is to work on posture. We want nice upright posture, which helps us be able to see things, helps us feel good, decrease back pain, have better balance and movement. So the power up, if you're in standing, you're going to bring your feet wider apart than your hips. In sitting, you're also going to bring your feet wide apart. So whichever of us you want to follow along with, we're going to do the power moves together, and we're going to do 20. So in standing, the first step is to come down into a squat. We like to reach our hands forward and keep our eyes up. So we come down, and then we're going to power up and open up through our arms up, come kind of high. There we go. That kind of helps us with spacing. That looks beautiful. We're even opening our fingers and stretching our fingers apart from each other. That's 1. And you can count loud with me too. Down. We can get the voice training in. 2. Down and up. 3. Down and up. 4. Down and up. 5. Down and up. 6. Down and up. 7. Down and up. 8. Down and up. 9. Down and up. 10. We're going to 20. Down and up. 11. Down and up. 12. Down and up. 13. Down and up. 14. Down and up. 15. Down and up. 16. Down and up. 17. Down and up. 18. Down and up. 19. Down and up. 20. Whew, shake it out. And there was some research a few years ago that showed that even getting into certain postures, this was separate from Parkinson's exercise research, but just in general for the population, that our posture really does influence how we feel. And when you move and stretch open like that, can increase some chemicals in our brain that help us feel more confident and more powerful. So that was the power up to work on posture. Does anyone feel like they're standing up a little bit taller after that? Yeah, it works. Well, 20 reps. Next, we're going to work on balance and weight shifting. This is something that can be impacted specifically for people with Parkinson's. So we really want to be able to do big weight shifts. So our feet, again, a bit wider apart than your hips. We're going to rock our weight over to the right and reach up and over. We're still working on posture 2. That's 1. Over to the left, count with me. 2. Switch. 3. Switch. 4. Switch. 5. Switch. 6. Switch. 7. Switch. 8. Switch. 9. Switch. 10. You know we're going to 20. 11. Switch. 12. Switch. 13, switch, 14, switch, 15, switch, 16, switch, 17, switch, 18, switch, 19, and 20. Shake it out. Excellent work. They're pretty straightforward, simple exercises. These are the kind of things you can do. If you're on a road trip and you get out of the car, move your body, do some stretches. You're going to feel better. If you're sitting at a computer for a while, if you're watching a TV show, you can get up and move your body in a pretty simple way, but it really helps you feel better and different. Next is the twist. So a lot of times muscles, especially in the trunk, can get more stiff. So we want to do exercises that help loosen up our trunk because trunk mobility is really important for function. Getting dressed, putting a seatbelt on, reaching across the table to get salt or pepper. There's a lot of things throughout our day that we need trunk mobility, and if those muscles are tight and those things are harder, that is frustrating. So we want to do exercises that help loosen up those muscles. So for the twist, we're going to do a modified version from kind of the main power move for space reasons. So you're going to take your right hand and reach across your body as far as you can. Again, hands are open. That's 1. Then we switch. Left arm reaches across your body really big. Turn your body. 2. Switch. 3. Switch. 4. Switch. 5. Switch. 6. Switch. 7. Switch. 8. Switch. 9. Switch. 10. Switch. 11, switch, 12, switch, 13, switch, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Very nice. Back to the middle. Anyone feel that they already got a little bit looser? So rhythmical movement and exercise has actually been shown to directly reduce rigidity, the symptom of Parkinson's. So when you get into a good flow with your exercise and get in a good number of repetitions, it really can actually directly impact a symptom of Parkinson's, which is pretty cool. All right, last one of our power moves is the step. So moving around in space is super important, and most people with Parkinson's do notice some change in stepping or walking, so it's a really important thing to practice. We're gonna bring our feet about hip width apart, and ideally in this case, we're gonna take a step forward. If you don't have room to step forward, you can go ahead and do a march and just do a high knee in place. And if you're stepping, you're gonna step out to the side, you're sitting, you're gonna step out to the side. All right, so 20 steps, ready, whether it's a lift out to the side or forward, step, really picking that foot up and kind of lunge into it. 1, together, switch sides. 2, and the amplitude is important, really lift. 3, together. 4, together. 5, together. 6, together. 7, together. 8, together. 9, together. 10, together. 11, together. 12, together. 13, keep lifting all the way to the end. 14, together. 15, together. 16, together. 17, together. 18, together. 19, together. 20, together. Thank you all so much. It's so fun to be up here and see all of you moving and to exercise together. Thanks for trying out the power moves, and know that that was just a taste. There's so many ways that there's variety, there's progressions, there's regressions. So there's a lot that can be done with the power moves to really help you be exercising in the right way for you to get the most out of it. All right,